Hey, welcome back, everybody, to SmarterUmedia, where we dare to make you smarter in 2 minutes. But we know we're going to be so compelling, you're just going to have to stick around and hear more. Unbelievably excited to have Captain Donald Xiques with us today, who was a captain in the Navy when he retired. At one point, was head of all security at the Pentagon. So I'm telling you, we have great expertise with us today. Donald, welcome to SmarterUmedia.
Well, thanks, Steve. Good to be here.
Now, see, Donald is literally on a ship right now. This is what happens when you retire as a captain in the Navy, is you have to be on a ship at all times. He is tooling around some parts of the world. So if his video is a little bit sketchy, that just makes it more cool. Now, you know, Donald, the way we do this, we don't keep our audience waiting around for some big thing at the end. We start straight off, give them 2 minutes with something that makes them smarter. You've seen so much of the world, more than I'm ever going to see. Now you get to, after I find our buddy the chicken. So chicken's ready.
All
Chicken's
right.
ready. I'm going to add 2 minutes. That's one. That's two. All right, Donald Xiques, make us just a little bit smarter.
Well, I'll start with a story. When I was 12, I inherited / found in a dumpster a big box of National Geographics, and that one event is perhaps the thing that launched my entire focus in life, which is
Wow.
to to find excitement, explore, and diffuse knowledge. They in National Geographic they talk about diffuse geographic knowledge, but when you sit down and you're 12 years old and you look at the world in little snapshots from, I think my collection that I had went back to 1923, I believe, and I just looked at the pictures and read the little blurps below each picture. At 12, that was asking a lot to read that much, but it just opened up this wonderful world for me. So, you know, whether it's your thing or not to travel around the world, or science, or nature, or the human condition, I found that National Geographic was what launched my curiosity in directions I never dreamed possible. Not from a little boy in Knoxville, Tennessee, anyway.
Well, that little boy in Knoxville, Tennessee has gone on to do extraordinary and amazing things. And look at that. You got 23 seconds left. You have made us smarter in even less than 2 minutes. Now, anybody who wants to take off, go ahead. But I'm going to tell you, we have just planted a seed that we're going to grow an oak from, because Donald has more stories and things and adventures than I can possibly get to, but we're going to get to as many of them as I can. So I'm going to restate back to you, Donald, what I think you said to make us smarter in 2 minutes. And that is, basically, it is a life process. It doesn't start somewhere, end somewhere. It doesn't start in 2 minutes, end in 2 minutes. It's life. Life is learning.
Absolutely. And curiosity, striving to find boundaries of your own personal willingness to explore this amazing universe. That's really the secret that I find drives me to do things when I get up in the morning. Just look at this vast, mysterious universe and think, wow, what a great place.
Well, I'm going to start where you ended, because I think it's one of the things we undervalue all the time when we think about how it is we process a day. We undervalue how we start and how we end the day. So there's a neurologist, probably the guy who's imaged more brains than anyone in the world, who I heard him say what he does when he wakes up in the morning is he throws his feet off the side of the bed, puts his hands on his legs, and he says, "Today is going to be a great day." And he says it out loud. And he says, as a neurologist, it's extraordinary how we change our perspective by doing things like that. And then before he goes to sleep at night, he spends a bit of time going through a handful of things, 3 things, 4 things that really were impactful and powerful for him that day. and that gets his brain set for the unconscious to do its thing overnight, but to do it in a different way, to process it. So when you say, the adventure is waking up every morning, there is a way that you can, even if that's not how you feel today, you can feel that tomorrow or sometime soon in the future.
Well, Steve, I couldn't agree anymore. He's obviously a lot more disciplined than I am. I don't know that I have formalized it to that extent, but I certainly agree with and try to do that sort of thing. My age these days, I'm just every day I wake up, I'm like, oh, thank you, God, because there's we have a finite time here on Earth, and if it's wasted pursuing things that aren't truly important to you, then at the end you'll be full of regret. At least I would be. I try to start each day is just to realize that it's like, well, you got a finite amount of time. Let's get out there and find what we can do. As long as you do everything you can to maximize yourself and not hurt other people along the way, then I think you've spent your time wisely.
Well, you've been all over the world. And when you talk about appreciation for life, I can't help but think of Pakistan because you were ill. So tell the story because it's impossible for me not to ask you to tell it.
Well, I had flown up to Gilgit, which is up in the Hindu Kush, where if you're a polo fan, you'll be glad to know that that's where the game of polo first originated, at least where the British first discovered it.
Yeah, that's going to really be meaningful to a lot of American audience.
Yeah. Well, even if you don't play polo,
You'll be happy to know.
You'll be delighted to know that originally, instead of hitting a ball around, they hit the captive, the head of the tribe that they had just defeated around.
Oh, so, good story. Good story. So there you go.
Local color there. In this beautiful little village nestled below Nanga Parbat, which is like the 5th highest peak in the world. I was staying with a friend at their house, and I'd gone into the bazaar and got a biscuit, a little cookie, and some desi chai, some local tea, and just enjoyed that. Bad idea, but I'd been in Pakistan for a year, so I knew it was a bad idea before I even got started. Well, anyway, I got home, and it suddenly took charge, and I had 2 exits and no waiting, and it was I was down for the count. And after a while, I realized it's like, we're not in Kansas anymore. This is not something I'm going to be able to, just shake off or go to the walk-in clinic or something like that. But I finally found out that there was a Pakistani military hospital in Gilgit, so a little cantonment. So I went up to the hospital, and weak as a puppy, and the doctor took a glass syringe out of isopropyl alcohol bath, a stainless steel needle, screwed it on, pulled out some low modal, which is a form of medicine that helps control dysentery, and squirted out that bubble in the end of the syringe, and then wiped the needle off with his fingers. And I'm like, what?
You are not in Kansas. Yeah, you're right. Not anymore, buddy.
Wipe the needle off with your fingers. And he goes, no, I didn't. I said, yes, you did. I saw you. He jabs into my arm. I'm like, well, I'm going to die one way or the other. It doesn't matter.
Well, from grabbing and finding in the trash some National Geographic magazines to a different world outside of the world you knew, there's always a path. And, I say to anyone that will dare to listen, and certainly to my kids, pick a path and start walking, because you have no idea. You didn't know then, as you were sitting in Knoxville, Tennessee, and imagining what the world might be like. You had no idea what that would lead to, but you took a path and you started walking. Let's go back a little bit and talk about what that is, because I think the serendipity of life is something that you have been a large participant in. So as you went from your junior high school, where I met you, to high
Yeah.
school, and then into college and beyond. You didn't start out to be an adventurer. You didn't go and get a degree in adventurer. You got a degree in biology. So, what attracted you to the study of biology?
Well, I feel that it's just naturally uh, the way my brain works. Biology and the sciences just fit in with the way I think, and I went on to. I loved biology, but I was afraid that I might not have as many, or I thought that I might have more career opportunities. So I switched to chemistry, and ended
You
up
were in biology first. Is that true, or are you just lying for me? Yes, it was biology, and then you switched over to chemistry. Gotcha.
right, and probably not very good at chemistry. Probably better at biology, but I was fascinated by the sciences, and chemistry and biology are things that help me understand the world around me.
One of the things that I love about your life trajectory is that you're literally one of the people who have cleaned up the messes we humans make. When you look at the things you cleaned up, which ones do you look at and go, oh my gosh, these were blew my mind as to what we can create as waste and leave it for the environment to deal with?
I would say Lapari landfill, which was one of the Superfund sites that was a licensed uh, and regulated landfill, but it was located in Lapari, New Jersey, and it was completely surrounded by neighborhoods. So there were playgrounds, elementary schools, and for
Oh
years
my
the
God.
major corporations had disposed of their volatile and semi-volatile solvents in this landfill. And the way that the landfill, where it was situated, is that it permeated into all of the areas that you just go, well, what's the worst case? What could possibly go wrong? Well,
Oh my God.
that was the answer. Elementary schools and playgrounds and houses and drinking water, and the the Environmental Protection Agency had uh, a list of all of the hazardous waste sites that they had found in the United States, and they categorized them by the complexity of the pollution, the extent of pollution, and the danger to the environment, to the surrounding areas. So they prioritized it. And Lapari landfill was the number one Superfund site in
Number
America.
one.
The number one Superfund site.
Oh, well, I mean, again, the proximity to kids and people and the like. I mean, at some point, nobody was looking at all, and there's stories of people just taking toxic waste and dumping it on highways, right? I mean, there at some point there was nothing that stopped anyone, nobody looking, and you go ahead.
Well, this one was even more tragic and cautionary in that it was licensed. It Everybody knew what they were dumping in there. They just had a failure of imagination. They couldn't imagine that dumping solvents into the ground back in the 1960s and 70s was a bad thing. They thought, well, you know what, you can't see it. So the caution would be is you have to look out into the future. You have to be able to imagine what could go wrong and take steps to make it as safe as you can, because there's all those solvents. We're as guilty as the companies that disposed of them, because we use the plastics and the strippers and the solvents in our everyday life, and those companies aren't making them for themselves. So being mindful of what you're working with and not taking shortcuts, I think, is the thing that came out of that, and be aware that just because it has been approved by the authorities doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. So you have to be vigilant on those sorts of things when you're dealing with bad actors.
There's this tension, right? It's what you're motivated by, and if you're not to, I mean, as a guy who creates companies, it's companies aren't bad, but they don't have the incentives that are always aligned with the people they serve or the people around them. So if you are creating those things, putting them out into the market, you want to continue to make them because they are what your lifeblood is. And we have developed systems that aren't perfect. In fact, they're terrible usually, but at least they're systems to try to do something about it. And yet there's always this tension that comes along where people feel like, well, with too much regulation, we're not allowing companies to do what they need to do and the like. And I love the personal responsibility message, but I also think it's important for us to try to, as a society, find ways that we stop the problem from happening so you aren't spending so much more on the other end. Do you have some notion of what that looks like? Do you ever have the studies of what the ratio is? In other words, if we spend later, how much more we spend?
I can tell you anecdotally that the 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 costs in treasure and effort and lives is immensely higher when you don't uh, do it right the first time. When you take shortcuts, when you have an imperfect solution, and then you have to go back and fix it. I think part of the allure of illegal or irresponsible waste disposal is the fact that, well, we'll get our money and the population, the people of the United States will pay for it to be cleaned up, and that's what happened. Is the company or companies that were disposing of it, they took their profits, they made their money, and then turned it over to everyone else to pick up the cost. And the cost not only was what it would have cost to do it right the first time, but it also cost so much more because you had to do studies. You had to figure out where it had gotten to, figure out how to get it back out, and then dispose of it the right way. So that exponentially more expensive to fix it after the fact rather than doing it right the first time.
100%. All right, I want to go back to adventure because
All
that's the
right, all
fun,
right.
that's the fun stuff, right? Here, the trajectory of somebody who finds some National Geographic magazines, that's an inflection point in your life. I will tell you, as a guy who went spelunking with you, went into a cave with you and your wonderful mom and sister once, you had adventure around you at all times. I think there's something in that too.
Well, it happened pretty early on in life. My mom had been born in China as a daughter of a missionary, and had an amazing opportunity to see the world in ways that most folks don't. And so my father died when I was 8 years old, and my mom, rather than stay around the house with four kids, took all of us on a trip to visit her sister who lived in France, and we spent the entire summer going up the Dordogne River Valley and playing on archaeological digs that were friends of my uncle who was a professor at the University of Bordeaux, and we had wonderful opportunity to just see and explore from a child's wonder, and from that it taught me not to be afraid of the bigger world out there. So I was really pretty lucky to get a good start that way. But it's certainly available to anybody who wants it. The world's out there.
Well, that's entirely true. I think you were steeped in it. That description makes perfect sense. It's available to everyone, but we all have sort of different parameters that we walk through life with. And I think being encouraging yourself to take a step to go in and do be the adventure and the like is a way that you can find more of those things. How did you find the military, or how did the military find you?
Well, I one of the things that I always wanted to do was to fly, so I applied and was accepted to the Navy aviation program. I was commissioned through Aviation Officer Candidate School in Pensacola, Florida. One thing led to another, but I eventually changed my designator from aviation to intelligence. It was probably a much better fit for me, and I'm always quick to point out it's intelligence, not intelligent. There's a difference, and so,
Well, we know.
so
Don't worry.
just so people don't get the wrong idea. In that, I had a just an amazing trajectory in the Navy, getting to do counter narcotics in Central America, the Southern Caribbean. I got to do amphibious warfare out of Little Creek and Dam Neck, Virginia. I worked at the Joint Analytical Center in Molesworth, England, where I did counterterrorism. Worked for Joint Command in Stuttgart, Germany, where we were supporting Bosnia-Herzegovina. From there, worked with the Kosovo operations out of Vicenza, Italy, and I got an opportunity to serve as a assistant naval attaché in New Delhi, India, and the defense attaché in Sri Lanka, the naval attaché in Cambodia, a tour in Afghanistan with 5th Corps, picked up a tour as the defense attaché's senior defense official for South Africa. And then my last tour was the Navy commanding officer for the NMCC, the National Military Command Center at the Pentagon. So that was my last tour, was in the Pentagon.
Well, again, you just go through that list. It's an extraordinary list. And you were in the reserves. Is that
Right? Right.
How does someone get involved in the reserves?
Well, the enlisting process is the same. Congress limits the size of our active duty Army. And so folks who are full time go against that number of personnel that we can have in our standing Army. The reserve serves as a pool to draw from when the demand increases. And as we've found out since 2001, there's a huge demand. And so the reserves have transitioned over the years. It used to be that there was very little chance that you would actually do anything more than a weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. But currently, our reserve forces are in heavy demand on active duty, and that's where I came in and had an opportunity to do 15 years on active duty as a reservist, and it was really rewarding for me because I had the good sense or lack of good sense to say yes. That's kind of the thing that got me into
Yeah.
a lot of places that I had no idea where I was going. Was people I would have orders for different places, and just like, sure, absolutely, I'll take those. So one of my original positions involved taking orders to Nicaragua, and it was to do counter narcotics, and I got down to Panama, and they said, well, that position we've closed that out, so we'll send you back home, or if you want, you can go to Belize. And it, that's, I'm like, sure, okay. And that's, how I ended up doing a series of counter narcotics tours in Belize and in Barbados.
Well, that's a great sort of life lesson. I mean, it's easy when things change to be skeptical and sort of pull back and not do something. If you say yes when you can or when it makes sense, don't do anything that will harm you, right? But
Right.
if you can say yes, you get an opportunity to at least try something out, and you get so much more out of life.
Exactly. I think that the the yes factor has served me well. It's put me in some places I didn't want to be, but you can adapt when you get there and make the best of that.
I mean,
So
that's part of it. That's the yin and the yang, right? So the other side, again, it's not just you'll always find yourself where you want to be, but it's been a pretty great life. And you have, I was there at your retirement. I was there as you walked out of the office and walked around with a Pied Piper in front of you and a bunch of friends and all of your colleagues having a grand old blast. So now, I mean, which by the way was a great day.
that that was fantastic. The best departure ever.
Well deserved. Thank you for your service. There are other professions, so many of them, that we should say it to as well. Top of that list for you?
Certainly, I think of the folks who put their life in danger, in harm's way to keep us safe, which includes firemen, police officers, and emergency responders, folks who work in the hospital. Those are the
Yep.
obvious ones. But there's also two other groups: people who work in government, the people who do that work day in, day out, allow us to have a society to where we can not only survive but can prosper. We live in the Roman Empire. When you look at how great a time we have as citizens of the United States, and it's just amazing how well they've organized over the years to make a complex society run relatively smoothly. And then there's also the people who work to make life better. It may not be their profession, but the things that they do, the coaches, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Educators,
educators.
educators, nurses. I mean, you mentioned a little bit of the hospital, but I mean, the gratitude for what people do in order to make our lives possible. Thich Nhat Hanh, one of, I think, the great thinkers of this generation or the last few generations, says that he wasn't satisfied with English words to talk about our relationship to each other. So he came up with interbe, because to be is not really, doesn't capture it, because we can't be alone. None of this is possible without our interconnection. And if you take the time to think of all the people who made it possible for you to have a can of beans in front of you so that you can open it, it is a very broad and wide chain. So what you're talking about, I so echo in the gratitude for all of us. And like I said, I think it becomes a little bit rote for us to say that, and thank you for your service to our military, which we should. Great gratitude for people who are willing to lay down the greatest sacrifice. But if we could have a little more of that all together, man, that'd be a nice piece of the equation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. All right, well, we could talk forever, and I'm sure we will talk forever. But it's that time, that I asked you to show up with some sort of way to make us smarter at getting information. So, what sort of resource have you found that was a great way to find better information in your own life?
Right. So, I at any type of information, um, the the important thing is getting uh, getting the right information. So, for me, what works for me is the scientific method, which is enables you to gather facts and evaluate those facts. Imagine what the answer could be, and then to evaluate what it is that what you find in your experimentation. And for a less geeky way of looking at things is there's a lot of noise out there in these days. So seek information that talks to fundamental truths, that is peer reviewed. These days, if you want an opinion, you can find one that supports your view on everything, and that's not always a good thing. So look at information that's out there with a degree of skepticism and test it to see if it works and if it's truthful in nature. Uh, you have to eliminate a lot of the emotional aspects of it because our brains are wired in a certain way that people have figured out how to hijack these days, and you get bombarded with information that your brain will naturally tend to gravitate towards, and that's not always in yours or society's best efforts. So adopt some of the scientific method for looking for facts that can be verified, that can be reproduced, that has been peer reviewed. Because even science is this constant journey moving forward, and things that we believed 100 years ago, we don't believe these days because we've found more information. But when you look for information that affects your life, make sure that you've gone and eliminated the traps that get you emotionally wrapped up in a something that someone is manipulating you for their benefit.
For sure. What I hear you saying is, and the scientific method is a great way to refer to it, be on the journey. So as we talk about being an adventurer, if in information you can be an adventurer who understands that if you're honest with yourself today, you don't believe everything that you believed a year ago. You don't believe everything that you believed 5 years ago. And so with that in hand, you know that this is a journey. And if what you're doing is getting the best information you have, this is the way I would articulate the scientific method. You get the best information you have, but understand that it's always changing. So if you get more information, you are willing to add it to what your understanding is and literally have a different understanding. That allows us to actually have conversations with anyone.
Absolutely. That's far better than I could have put it, but yes,
That is a big deal.
I agree, and I think that is clearly stated, and I think folks who work along those lines will find their lives to be more fulfilling, more rewarding in this finite amount of time that we have.
Yes, boy. As we get older, it just feels so finite, doesn't it? Sort of. We have to say it again. It's like I don't know how much time I have left. The other corollary, the other piece of sort of what you're saying, I think, is that we are, as we do curate our information. When you talk about peer reviewed, that's something that some folks probably do or know about, but I would distill that down into the reality that there's no way that we're doing our own primary research. So there's no way I'm going to be able to go through my day to day only relying on my own understanding, right? Only
Correct.
relying on the things that I have witnessed, the things I've been a part of. So as we talk about curating information, what makes it so incredibly important and challenging is that there's almost an infinite number of sources that are coming at me all the time, as you said, and some of them are specifically engaged in trying to lead me down a path that is a deception or misinformation. So peer review is one of those things that people do. So a large group of learned folks who study this every day actually take whatever comes in. They go through a process of reviewing it and saying, yeah, sounds pretty good. We'll put it in this publication. Otherwise, it doesn't get in. At least that's some filter, right? We got something where there are people that we can go, all right, might not be right, because everything might not be right. But at least I can feel more confident in something that goes through that process than just somebody who fires off a tweet late in the night.
Absolutely. And when you look at the place where we are, we don't do the original research on almost everything in our life. We depend on those who came before us, and that's why you need to find folks that are trustworthy. As Sir Isaac Newton said, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Find those giants.
Find the giants and be skeptical if they fall, because the bigger they are, the harder they fall sometimes. And yet that at least gets us closer to the mark. Donald Xiques, you are the mensch of all mensches. Love and adore you. Glad you came on to Smarter You. And everybody, we will see you next time.